On 60 Minutes last night, Michael Sherwin was a guest. He is the federal prosecutor who's been leading the Justice Department's inquiry into the seditious action that occurred in this country on January 6th. Now, I call it seditious because I watched it on television, and if that's not sedition, then such a term doesn't exist. But according to the Times this morning, evidence the government obtained in these ongoing investigations that they're doing most likely meets the bar, you might say, necessary to charge some of these cowardly rat bastards who attacked the Capitol with sedition. And again, that's according to the federal prosecutor who's leading the inquiry. Now, the Justice Department has rarely brought charges of sedition. And by quick definition, of course, that's the crime of conspiring to overthrow the government. If that's not a serious charge, then to rework a tiresome phrase, a serious charge doesn't exist. But in that interview with 60 Minutes last night, Michael Sherwin said prosecutors had evidence that most likely prove sedition. He said, quote, "I personally believe the evidence is trending towards that and probably meets those elements. I believe the facts do support those charges, and I think that as we go forward, more facts will support the charge of sedition," end quote. Now, the last time federal prosecutors brought a case, a sedition case, was in 2010. And again, it was with the cowardly filth that populates this country and pretends like they're part of a militia or some important group. The Justice Department accused members of the militia, of a Michigan militia back in 2010 of plotting to provoke an armed conflict with the government. And all of the bastards involved in that, even though you know, I know, the government knew, everybody knew, except, I guess, the jury that heard the case, they were ultimately acquitted, even though they were guilty as hell. And the judge in the case said the Justice Department had not adequately proved that these filth in the Michigan militia had entered, quote, "a concrete agreement to forcibly oppose the United States government," end quote. The judge says, well, there just isn't enough evidence to prove that. Now, the statute on seditious conspiracy that is part of our legal system also says that people who conspire, quote, "to oppose by force the authority of the government, or to use force, quote, to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States," end quote, can be charged with sedition. Well, what the hell were they doing on January 6th? By orders of the filthy bastard Donald Trump, this mob of cowardly son of a bitches attacked the United States Capitol in order to delay or hinder or prevent the execution of the affirmation of the electoral college votes from each individual state. If that's not hindering or preventing the following of any law of the United States, then here comes the phrase again, such a thing doesn't exist. I mean, to me, all of this is so clear-cut, so obvious. So the government now, our government, has charged some of the defendants in the January 6th case with conspiring to derail the final certification of Biden's electoral victory. And doesn't that meet the definition? It does to me. Now, to the prosecutor who's handling this, Michael Sherwin, He witnessed the crime as it unfolded. And he said that after he dressed in his running clothes and entered the crowd at the rally near the White House, he saw what he called a carnival environment of people listening to speeches and selling T-shirts and snacks. Jesus Christ. Michael Sherwin said, quote, where it was initially pro-Trump, it digressed into anti-government, anti-Congress, anti-institutional. And then, he adds, I eventually saw people climbing the scaffolding. The scaffolding was being set up for the inauguration. When I saw people climbing up the scaffolding, hanging from it, hanging flags, I was like, this is going bad fast. End quote. Yeah. I'm sure that's what most of us who watched this horror on television felt that day. I remember getting these little frissons of, if that's the right pronunciation, I'll have to check with Elise on that. This little frisson of fear just ricochet through my body. Like, what the hell am I watching? Now, from the start, Michael Sherwin has overseen the investigation as the acting U.S. Attorney in Washington, D.C. That's a role that he ceded to a new interim leader in early March, acting U.S. Attorney. And he stepped down from leading the investigation on Friday and returned to Miami, where he had been a line prosecutor. Now, Sherwin told 60 Minutes last night that the U.S. government had charged more than 400 people. Among them are hundreds accused of trespassing, at least 100 or more than 100 accused of assaulting officers, including Brian Sicknick, the Capitol Police officer who died, who was murdered by these filthy goddamn rioters. Sicknick and two other officers were sprayed with an unidentified chemical agent that one of the cowardly son of a bitches who attacked the Capitol said was used to repel bears, bear spray. A medical examiner has not yet determined how Officer Sicknick died, according to Michael Sherwin. So 2 suspects were charged with assaulting an officer instead of murder. But Sherwin says that could change. Sherwin said, quote, if evidence directly relates that chemical to his death, well, in that scenario, correct, that's a murder case, end quote. Now, Michael Sherwin added that only about 10% of the cases so far dealt with more complicated conspiracies that were planned and executed by these far-right neo-fascist cowardly thugs, including members of the Oath Keepers and the Three Percenters and the Proud Boys and all these other fucked up organizations. So they're only about 10% have dealt with that. The idea that some of these scum organized or came to Washington specifically to breach the Capitol and worked in conjunction with these other groups to attack the United States. And Sherwin reiterated assertions that he made shortly after the attack that prosecutors were examining the conduct of the orange bastard filth Donald Trump, who, as we all know, told his supporters to first to attend the rally on January 6th, and then egg them on with baseless claims that he had won the election, inciting these moronic fucks to go ahead and attack the United States, which they were more than willing to do because, in my opinion, they were cocked and primed and ready to do it anyway. Sherwin said, quote, it's unequivocal that Trump was the magnet that brought the people to D.C. on January 6th. Now the question is he criminally culpable for everything that happened during the siege, during the breach of the building, end quote. He added, we have people looking at everything, end quote. Now, Sherwin is the federal prosecutor who had been leading this inquiry. He is not now, as he mentioned last night on 60 Minutes. He's out of it, at least for the time being. God, who can blame him? Who can blame him? And in direct relation to what occurred on January 6th, we come now to this filthy monster, Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin. I talked about this over the weekend, either in the bonus podcast for our subscribers or in the Patreon podcast for people who subscribe to that. But I pointed out, using a piece in, I think, the Washington Post, I'm not sure, but that Ron Johnson may be the single greatest purveyor of Trump bullshit in the U.S. Senate. That's the role he's taken on. This son of a bitch will sit there and lie and lie. It's just astonishing to watch. So that being the case, defeating this punk in 2022 is already a matter of great concern. And Greg Sargent, writing at the Post today, said, but Johnson just offered a new defense of the former president's incitement of the Capitol riot that makes ousting him, Johnson, even more imperative. So I'll get to it in a second, but what removing Johnson from the U.S. Senate using the electoral system in Wisconsin wouldn't just choke off some of the most bullshit, filthy disinformation currently poisoning U.S. politics, but it would also show that a certain style of deranged fictionalizing about Democrats and the left and the progressives, a style that Trump, the pig, amped up to 11 on a scale of 10, 1 to 10. But that deranged bullshit, it's seeing its appeal start to shrink. If this thug could be dismissed, replaced as a senator. And that could constitute a step, although I don't agree with this, toward the de-radicalization of the Republican Party. The Republican Party, I wish I had, I guess I could send an email to Greg Sargent, couldn't I? But the Republican Party is dead. It does not exist anymore. No, it doesn't. Not even the sainted Mitt Romney is a member of the Republican Party. He thinks he is, but if he is a member of the Republican Party, he is a zombie, just like the Republican Party is. The Christian fascist party is now the dominant right-wing or conservative, if you want to denigrate the word conservative, collection point. And I've said before, the Germans, so many parties in Europe, or so many governments in Europe, have the Christian Democrats. We have the Christian fascists. That is not hard to process. A lot of people say, oh, Malloy, you're attacking the Christians again. No, I'm not. They are defining themselves. They are the Christian fascist party. So I think Greg Sargent is wrong when he says that defeating Ron Johnson could constitute a step toward de-radicalizing the Republican Party. That's not going to happen. You don't de-radicalize a corpse. Now, there may be something called a Republican Party built from the corpse of the now dead Republican Party, but it's not the Republican Party that all of us in the United States have come to know over the course of our lifetimes. That's the one that is stumbling around the countryside dead, a zombie. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.